Turbo had no other choice but to become the villain in Wreck-It Ralph. We first learn about Turbo while Sergeant Calhoun and Felix are walking in Sugar Rush, trying to find Ralph. Felix says he never thought Ralph would go turbo, and has to explain to Calhoun what that means. So when the arcade first opened, a game called Turbo Time was the most popular game, and probably the only racing game. Felix explains he loved the attention he got. So when a new game called Road Blasters was installed, with better graphics and gameplay, we are led to believe that Turbo became jealous, because he just simply wasn't getting enough attention, and while yes, that might slightly be true, I think it could be for other reasons as well. Turbo Time is now an outdated racing game, and we can see that it's not been played as much anymore. That has to be extremely stressful, because with time, Mr. Litwack would find Turbo Time a waste of space, because no one is playing it and it would get unplugged. So Turbo could have potentially been trying everything in his power to keep his game relevant, so this wouldn't happen. Also, we know all these characters are coded to be a certain way, so there are some things you have to blame the programmers for. Turbo is obviously the main character of his game, and it was coded with the purpose of being the best and the center of attention. It even seems the other characters in the game are just a worse version of him. So that has led him to be extremely narcissistic from birth. But anyways, he goes into Road Blasters and tries to take over the game, which he does, and it gets unplugged, which could have been a victory, but it backfired, and Turbo got his game unplugged as well, and he dies. Okay, not really. So further in the movie, Vanellope is racing King Candy, and he's trying as hard as he can not to let her cross the finish line. But during this, we get to see his real identity. King Candy has actually been Turbo this entire time. Now, knowing this leaves us with so much more to unpack about Turbo instead of just one little story Felix told. So we first meet King Candy when Ralph enters Sugar Rush. We see all the racers lining up at the start line, and King Candy comes out claiming, "Hello, my royal subjects, ha ha ha, have some candy." Honestly, from the first impression, he seems pretty fun and happy, and no one can really tell he's evil. The word subject does hint at him controlling the world though, as well as when he says, "Wipe the slate clean," which is practically what he did. Also, he does explain the magic loophole Vanellope will find, which is that if you're one of the first 9 people to pass the finish line, you are put on the roster for the next day. But honestly, nothing here is very suspicious yet. Vanellope sneaks up and throws in her gold necklace she stole from Ralph to join the race. By the way, if it wasn't for Ralph, she would have never been able to attend this race, because you need a gold coin to enter this race, and you can only get one from winning a race. But anyways, we then learn that she is a glitch, and no one there, especially King Candy, wants her to race. But still, from this conflict, King Candy doesn't really seem like a villain yet. It just seems as if he wants to stop the quote-unquote monster from racing. Also, I can't help but notice he looks stressed more than anything. Now we go into King Candy's castle after he arrested Ralph. They unmask him, and King Candy instantly recognizes him. No one else in this game has recognized him yet, but it makes sense that he did, because his original game was right next to Ralph's. Also, King Candy says, "I hope you're not going turbo," which is so ironic. And then King Candy simply just attempts to send Ralph back to his game, which shows he isn't evil enough to try to kill him to stop him from ruining his game. But Ralph really wants his medal though, so he escapes the security guards and gets back to Vanellope to try to help her win the race. King Candy tries to once again stop Vanellope from racing but fails at catching her. So he goes back to his castle and goes into this weird room with the Nintendo controller, puts in some weird code written down on a taper's napkin, which is interesting to me by the way, and he enters into a void type area where he's able to mess with code, which can't be a good thing. We then see him grab Ralph's medal from the code block Winner's Cup and add it to his huge box code, which we can see he probably altered tremendously to become such a huge brick. Also, when he leaves, we pan out to see Vanellope's code with no strings attached, floating in the black void, which is suspicious, but we can't rule out anything yet. So anyways, King Candy gives the medal back to Ralph to try once again to get him to leave, and then he tells him the supposedly real story about Vanellope. He explains that if Vanellope wins the race, people will play as her and realize that she glitches, and the game will be put out of order, and since she's a glitch, she won't be able to leave and she will die. From here, it's still really hard to tell if King Candy is evil, because he genuinely comes off as a compassionate and caring person here. I mean, even Ralph believes him. We don't realize he's truly evil until Ralph talks to the Gumdrop. He explains that Vanellope actually was a racer, until King Candy tried to delete her code, but he doesn't know why he did this because he locked up all their memories too. This seems extremely evil, and it is, but I still want to find out the true deeper reason he did this, and we are so close to getting there, but we just need a little more evidence. So the race we have been talking about has begun, and let's not forget the stakes. If Vanellope passes the finish line, she will join the roster. Now Vanellope is obviously extremely talented at racing and passes everyone, and then Vanellope passes King Candy, catching him completely off guard, and then he takes some weird route and bumps into her. We see him trying everything and anything to prevent her from crossing the finish line, but then her glitch ends up affecting him and shows his true self, Turbo. He then says,
"I am Turbo, the greatest racer ever, and I did not reprogram this world to let you take it away from me."
Please remember this line, because it's gonna be so important in a second. Now that's practically all the information we got on Turbo, because the next Turbo we see is on the boss level, and it's actually like a virus version of Turbo because he got eaten by a cybug and became some crazy virus. This version is insane and crazy and actually wants to kill Ralph, but this isn't the real Turbo, so I'm not going to use this version as evidence. Okay, we got all the evidence, so now let's unpack everything. I want to bring it back to what I said earlier about how we can't blame the characters 100% because they were coded to be a certain way. Of course, with time that code can wear off and you can become your own person, but that takes a long time. Look at Ralph. It took him 30 years to stray away from his villain coding, and while Turbo has been around for the same amount of time, he's never been in one place long enough to reflect and learn about himself. He's just been in survival mode. Let's now focus on a sentence that Turbo said.
I am the greatest racer ever.
This supports what I'm saying perfectly. Turbo was coded to be the best, the absolute best. Being the best was all that he knew, so when he realized he wasn't the best, of course it hurt him. It wasn't a part of his character to be second, or third, or last. So he got jealous because he was programmed to be the best, and now he isn't. Now that doesn't give him the right to do what he did, but let's dive into his brain for a second. So he is dealing with the fire of jealousy, and also struggling with the fear of being unplugged, because being an outdated game could potentially be the death of him. I mean, his fight or flight had to be kicking in so hard at this moment, and he made a tough, impulsive decision, and his choice obviously wasn't the right one, and he gets unplugged because of what he did, and then he's left with another fear. If he dies now, it's permanent. There's no more respawns. Turbo was now the talk of the hub, and everyone probably hated and disliked him, and that had to lead to some depression. According to the dates, Road Blasters was released in 1987, and Sugar Rush was released in 1997, so that means that Turbo was homeless for 10 years. I don't know exactly what he was doing, but that had to make him go absolutely crazy, especially because the arcade characters had to probably bully him and make constant jokes. I'm not sure if he hid, but I don't think he hid forever because of this Tapers napkin. I think one day Turbo visited Tapers, probably a usual spot for him drinking his root beer while depressed. And I don't know if it was him or someone else, but they figured out that there's some secret place in each game where you could reprogram code. This had to be planned extremely well too. He must have explored Sugar Rush for a while before he found the room and figured out the combo to access the code void. Turbo being able to reprogram Sugar Rush was the best choice. It's not a dangerous game, so he can ensure safety of himself. And also, it's a racing game. And now he can relive his glory days and become the best racer again. And I mean, Turbo had only two choices. Stay in the hub homeless, or create a new name for himself in a new game. I mean, which one would you choose? Turbo didn't get to live out his dream for long, and has now finally achieved his dream and purpose again after 10 long years of probably a very deep depression. So it makes sense for how hard he fights this whole movie to make sure Penelope doesn't steal a spotlight again. Also, if we analyze the world of Sugar Rush, he isn't doing anything evil to the game. The game still runs very smoothly every day. Everyone there is very happy and enjoying their lives, besides Penelope and Gumdrop. Now I know what he's doing is still pretty evil, but it seems like Turbo just wanted to live his purpose and will do anything in his power to protect that. I can't defend all of the things he did. I'm not his lawyer, and also he's dead. But I just feel like he had no other choice at times. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just overthinking.